Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Tips. So, Tuesday Tips is where we talk a little bit about quick, easy things you can do to get started with your leadership development. This week, we're talking about courage. And yesterday, if you caught yesterday's video, we talked about how important courage was. It's fundamental to any leader and any leadership development plan. So, today, I want to talk about fear. Fear is really personal. So when you're trying to develop courage, what you're actually trying to do is understand fear. So this video is really for anyone that wants to focus on courage as part of their development plan. And in my experience, it's a lot of people. Most people struggle with this particular competency, whether it's because they don't feel they're very courageous or they're not 100% sure if they can stand up for those things that are right, or maybe they're just struggling with letting go of the things that are familiar to them. And that can be the environment that you work in. And I get it, because leadership is definitely not for the cowardly. So having to step up and do the right thing in the face of adversity or politics or personality or challenging the status quo is not easy. So maybe you've even been scolded for being too courageous at work. I've worked with clients before where courage is encouraged, but yet you practice it and you get reprimanded, or they feel like they can't stand up without some sort of repercussion. And sometimes it's just not fitting in. And so I always say it's better to be a lion than a sheep, but it's hard, and I understand that. So this is for anyone that really wants to understand what is in that way. What if you knew how to overcome your fears? What if you knew how to actually tackle that stuff that holds you back from being the courageous leader that you want to be? So leadership is 1000% about courage first. And I always say this because I've watched executives right on up to the C-suite be great decision makers, great strategists, but when they lack courage, their strategy can't be executed because they're not standing up for the things that will push things in the right direction. Or they have great decision-making capability, meaning they can make the right decisions at least 95% of the time in a quality way in a reasonable time frame. But if courage is holding them back, they know the right thing to do, but there's something inside them that they'll hesitate at that table, in that discussion, in that meeting, of getting those right things done. So you have to know what's in your way in order to get around it, because the only way around it is through it. So today's Tuesday Tips is around tips to overcoming fear. And I'm going to take a bit of a different angle. As a psychologist, I will dig deep into this topic because I understand it in a different way. So this is bigger than a typical development intervention or training class. So be wary and cautious of training classes that teach courage outside a leadership development framework that hasn't been constructed or facilitated by someone that has some experience in this space. So tip number one, overcoming these fears is, once you've defined what's in your way, and there's some typical things that I think we all face at work, and we'll share more about that later in the week. What are those typical fears that people face at work? Number one is you have to experience it thoroughly. So you've got to sit with that fear for a while. And that means understanding, is it something even deeper before you entered the workforce? Is it something that has been a pattern for you that has been successful in the past but isn't anymore? So you have to experience it thoroughly. The second is you have to experience it repeatedly. So once you've processed it, you've got to get yourself out there feeling it. So it's no different than when people are overcoming phobias. They are sensitized over and over and over to that thing their worst fear is consuming them in order to get over it. It seems counterproductive, but it's not. So if you are really struggling at work, standing up to things that you know are wrong. So again, let's go back to what courage means. Courage is about standing up for those things that you know are right. And it's standing up regardless of personality, regardless of politics, regardless of consequence, because you're standing up to get the right things done, the ethical things done. And Having to experience it repeatedly means you need to be willing to go in and charge it all the time. And it's not easy. And in most organizations, if you look around, there's usually only a handful of people that demonstrate courage consistently because they've gone through this before where they're willing to sit with it. They understand how to process those fears and they understand how to step up consistently and develop that resistance to all those things that will pull us back into not being courageous. And the third is being patient and persistent. So when you're developing a competency like courage, because it's so uncomfortable, you're dealing with people around you and groups and team dynamics and systems dynamics. So when you're facing that tough meeting, when you know that the group or the decision or your boss is headed in the wrong direction and nobody's standing up and you're looking around and everyone kind of knows that it's wrong, but no one is saying a thing. And I think everyone out there can relate to that. You have to be patient and persistent because you have to know that it's going to take you time to experience it thoroughly, repeatedly, and have that patience while you're developing it. So for those of you out there, I've attached a free white paper and it's what it really takes to be a C-suite executive. And if you haven't guessed, courage is a big part of that. But there's a competency framework in there that gives you a little more robust understanding of the individual, the team, and the business competencies that you need to be a great leader. Courage is one of them. And check back tomorrow with Workshop Wednesday, where we're going to talk about why it's so hard to be courageous, like what holds us back and why is it such a common development gap for people. So again, tips for Tuesday: you have to experience it thoroughly, you have to experience it repeatedly, and be patient and persistent when you're developing courage. It's not easy, but it's needed. So again, this is for anyone that is willing to do the work to be a great badass leader out there. So thanks all, and we will check back tomorrow.